Mike D, how are you, man?
I'm good. Every year. Yeah, it's been a while.
Every week, come on, Mike. I was going fast. Sorry, I was trying to get it
Yeah,
all
I
in.
get you. Listen, I get you.
It's
I
a,
got it.
it's a
It's
long,
all,
it's a
it's all good
long,
with me.
it's a long preamble, Mike. My apologies.
As
Hey, next
long
time.
as you're not doing the eulogy, we'll be good.
Well, we got a long way to go for that, Mike. Yeah, fingers crossed and blessings. Hey, all right. So when you and I talk next week, the Saints are going to be in camp, which is
Okay.
remarkable to think that we've waited this long, but we're on the precipice of it. So we now know also no preseason games, and we know the roster is going to be 80 men. So how do those things factor into what we can expect, maybe at least early in camp?
Very competitive.
Yeah.
Yo, come on. Man, you sort of know if you're a head coach, I think going in, without anything major happening injury-wise, you probably have a pretty good idea. In the past, if you had a 53-man roster, you probably knew 45, and so, man, it's a pretty good little tally for those last 7 or 8 spots that you're looking at. This year, it may be a little bit tighter, just because you understand the dynamics of what's going to happen. The other thing, I think, what a lot of people aren't bringing up, I spoke about this last night on a couple of different shows I did, is this is what I think the biggest change will be. Not so much early part of camp, because, you're trying to get in work. You didn't get any work in. There was nothing as far as OTAs and spring drills and all this other stuff that they do in rookie camp. Is in the past, when you had that final cut down, you had 4 games that you could watch a player from another team.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do now? So I think what you'll see this year is maybe a little different. Teams trying to keep as many players that have been with them through the 5 or 6 weeks leading up into the regular season, more than going out and maybe finding a player, because then what kind of tape do you have on them? You have zero. Think about Taysom Hill. Great example. And Sean brought it up to us on one of the shows, coaches shows one time, that he was watching the NFL Network. He was watching a replay of the Packers game, and then they went back and said, "Man, listen, Taysom really looks good playing. Late in the third into the fourth quarter." They went back and re-looked at the film, and that's how they picked him up. If that was today, Taysom Hill would have been on the practice squad of the Green Bay Packers. Because you wouldn't have seen him in those games, preseason games. I think more than anything, it will affect a small part of your roster that didn't get to play. But I think for most coaches, they spend so much time on the practice part of the game, day to day, the grade on that particular deal. And there's always going to be a small percentage that doesn't work out, but you always make mistakes in evaluations anyway. Where I think you'll see a difference this year is when you're setting up your practice squads and developmental teams, you don't have tape of a guy that you maybe would have in the past. So I think you're more likely to keep that individual that you have, or maybe a player on another team that you graded very highly on the draft status part of it. And he didn't make a team. And I'm going to take a chance on him. We had a real high grade on him. I don't know what happened here, but let's try to get him. And what kind of espionage will go on? I'll sneak a guy in. Okay, listen, you coaching for the Edmonton team of the CFL. Go in there, but listen, take a close look at so-and-so and so-and-so. Hey, if you ain't cheating if you ain't trying, so to speak, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And they all do it. I don't care who you are. All this finger pointing at the Patriots, they do this and they do that. You don't think other teams in the NFL have done similar things? Come on, be real. You're living in La La Land if you don't believe that goes on. And everybody's trying to get a little edge. So it'll be interesting, how you get into camp, I'm coaching or I'm an assistant GM with a CFL team or whatever. I want to take a look. Okay, yeah. How that's going to work? Because I think it will have an effect on the developmental team, which eventually will have an effect on your team.
Mm-hmm.
Because somewhere during the season, either because of injury, because of somebody contracting the COVID-19 virus, you're going to have to play them. You're going to have to get them up on the squad. And I'm interested to see how the NFL does this part. If a player contracts that disease, what type of time frame will he have to sit out? And you're going to have to give some exemption to him. Because now you only have 2 guys if you put him on injured reserve that you can bring back. How does that affect it? And I think that's still trying to be worked out, but you're going to have a case in point here where it potentially could happen. And you got to think about it ahead of time. You can't do this in November. You got to do it now. You got to make kind of those decisions today or over the next few weeks on how you're going to be able to work that. But, Matt, I think it's going to be very competitive in camp with players because you're going to have a smaller amount. You understand what's at stake. The eye in the sky don't lie. Okay? They filming every damn thing you do out there on that field. Everything. And you don't have a makeup deal as, man, I had a couple bad days of practice, but, man, I'm going to hit it big on game time. What game time? There ain't no game time.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting how all that sort of sets up, because that developmental squad this year is going to be as important as it has ever been because of the potential of what could happen, that you could lose 3 or 4 guys. And so now you got to go and bring that guy up, and he potentially could be playing and potentially could be starting for you at some point.
Mike, one more on we've talked a bunch since the draft, you and I have, about the undrafted free agents. But one of your colleagues at Saints News Network had a really interesting write-up. It was Bob Rose about the veteran free agents that the Saints signed who might be, roster bubble guys like James Hurst on the offensive line or Marcus Hunt or Maurice Harris. Do you see this being more, or Anthony Chickillo, is this more challenging for those guys, or is it the other way? Because they're veterans and Sean Payton knows more what he's getting with those guys, they might be more apt to keep some of those guys.
Well, Bob and I look at it a little bit different. I think the veteran has the big advantage here.
Okay.
Because he's been there, done that. He's been there and done that. Now, here's the thing about Hurst. He's going to miss the first 4 games no matter what.
Right.
Because he's got the suspension. So, James, and listen, James has played right tackle, right guard, and left tackle. He's played across the board. You kind of know what you're getting here with James Hurst. Okay? You understand what you're getting with him. A guy that is versatile and could possibly play one of the tackle spots if needed. And so you get that. Chickillo, he's been on the all-potential team at Pittsburgh. Again, he was a guy that, man, he looks the part. I mean, he looks like somebody chiseled him out of stone. Where he's made an impact has been on special teams. So he's got a niche on what he can do out there on the field. You understand you're not bringing him and he's not going to get 9 sacks for you. Hunt has played defensive end and defensive tackle. Again, in the way they rotate their defensive line, they stole that from the college ranks. For years, the colleges has long done that. Rotated defensive linemen, 7, 8 guys. You've heard Coach O talk about that numerous times, about that I want to build up depth, that I can have that double rotation, that I can have 8, 9 guys that I can play in a game. The pros stole that from the college ranks. Growing up, did you hear about 5, 6 men playing defensive line? You might have heard a specialty guy as a pass rusher, but it wasn't that many guys. Today, it's situational football. Hunt has played defensive end. He's played defensive tackle. He's been a guy that has been a really good special teams player. And at 6'8", and with that wingspan, hey, I got him right smack dab in the middle. Hey, go ahead and give it a shot. and now they limit you on what you can do as far as jumping and hurling a guy. But, you do have kickers in this league that have a low trajectory, especially on the long kicks. You got to do it. That's a pretty tall guy to get over the top of. So I think it's going to be much harder. And I get Bob's point with the article on how he wrote it, and I don't totally disagree with what he's bringing up. But I think it's going to be much, much harder for the rookie guy that you don't know about than the guy that you know a little bit about what he's got the niche. No, I mean, everybody's under the gun, so to speak. When you sign Hunt and you sign Chickalo, you sort of know that those are guys late in the process of how you brought it in. Hurst would have been, I think, an early signing, but I think some teams backed off because you won't have him right away. You'll have to wait. But I'm willing to do that for a guy that has started and played that many positions. So I get what Bob was trying to say in the article. I just think it's going to be harder for the rookie to come in to make that impact because you gauging it on the most dreaded word in sports.
Practice.
Potential.
Oh, potential. That was another P word. Mike, I wanted to get a thought real quick. LSU's going to be on the practice field tomorrow morning, and I love the fact that they're having a 6 o'clock a.m. practice. It's the best way to...
Man, they do that in high schools today.
Like, it's the best way to make sure they ain't messing around on a Thursday night, man.
Well, put it to you this way. Most of us would know one thing not to go out on a Thursday night if you got a 6 o'clock or 6:30 practice.
That's the point.
But, man, listen, they got high schools, and in the past, I know, and one of my guys, Keith Menard, who was at Central Lafourche High School for a long time, and then now he's at Assumption, and Stephen Jr. is there also with him as an assistant coach. And Keith was like, man, I get those guys here at 6:30. Mike, it ain't like it used to be. Guys like you might have tried to do it, but none of these guys can hang no more, Jack. He's like, they're not rolling in in those type of shape. Either that or they'll be stooped over pretty good at one time.
Mike, Tristan Leigh, 5-star, number 1 offensive tackle in the country, thought to be a very heavy LSU lean. Today he released his top 5, and not recruiting list, top 5, top whatever, but he's got Ohio State, LSU, Bama, Clemson, and Oklahoma. As we mentioned, thought to be a very heavy LSU lean. Who do you see in Tristan Leigh?
As a freshman, he lived in Georgia for a long time, and then him and his family moved to California, and so he spent most of his high school days out in California, and he came to actually our line camp here at Nicholls State, the Louisiana line camp, as a freshman.
Oh, gosh.
Well, Hoss, one thing for sure, I could have spotted he was pretty good. It didn't take long. And who he reminds me so much of, as a high school player going into college, Jonah Williams.
Oh, wow.
That's who Leigh reminds me of, and that was Jonah's journey from Georgia to California, and then, but he didn't spend that freshman year there, and he came to camp, and he was like a man up against somebody in the 6th grade. Even at that time, I want to say as a senior, he was, I think he was 6'4.5", and he was probably 255, 260, and then he grew into a 300-pound man at that point. But he was so technically strong. His ability to move his feet, how well he could extend his arms and steer you. You watch Leigh does the exact same thing. A lot of people I've seen say he's a power player, but you look who he's going up against. He's going up against a 200-pound guy sometimes or a 220-pound guy, and he's 255 in that range. So, yeah, he's going to be a power player, but he's a guy that's going to have to pick up some weight and physically get stronger. But, man, his footwork, his arm extension, his ability to steer you, he's a good leverage run blocker. He gets good position. He kind of cranks you out a little bit. And then, man, that running back can roll right through it. Jonah Williams is the comparison to him. They're very similar athletes at similar times in their career. Now, Lee might be a tad taller, but I think it's going to be close. And I don't remember what Jonah was listed as coming out of high school, but I would bet, because sometimes he's extended a little bit. Probably he was 6'5", 250, 255. And I think if you look at Lee, he sort of looks like that today, very much like Jonah Williams. Jonah started at Alabama at right tackle. Okay, he started the first 2 years at tackle there, right tackle, and they moved him to the left side. And so I suspect whoever gets Lee, and I do think LSU's got a really good shot at him, and that would be a big catch to grab him. I think most likely, similar to Williams, he plays right tackle first, and then you swing him over to the left side.
Well, it's unlikely, Mike, that we ever see Tristan Leigh protecting Myles Brennan, because Brennan will likely be off to the NFL by the time Lee becomes a starter at LSU, provided he ends up at LSU. But we did get a really detailed interview with Myles that was released on the Hey Fightin' podcast with Cody Worsham, their in-house digital media manager. And it was interesting, Mike, because my big takeaway was that I don't know, listening to Myles, I don't know that he could have done anything more to prepare himself physically, mentally, in any way that you could possibly prepare for a season or for this opportunity. I don't know that Myles could have done any more. Where do you stand going into this season, confidence level in Myles' ability to keep the train rolling? Not to the degree Joe did, obviously. No one's saying 60 touchdowns and 5,000 yards, but to keep it going.
Yeah, listen, I've seen him throw the ball. Okay, so right off the bat, I know he can do that. What was interesting is that it is rare, and I mean a rare occurrence, that at the Manning camp, they would have two quarterbacks from the same school. He got invited to the Manning camp, and he threw the football the Friday. We're doing 4 hours of radio. He's right in front of me. You had all these guys from these networks and all this, and some of the college counselors, they stopped and watched him throw it. Now, listen, I was there for the 4 days. There's not a lot of that goes on. Now, every once in a while when you got a guy like Trevor Lawrence and they got a gang of them around Trevor to see how well he could throw the football. When Jameis Winston was there, he attracted a crowd. I mean, every time Jameis was in a group, it almost was like an entourage hit. Everybody wanted to see him throw the football. And it was interesting with Myles. Everybody wanted to see him throw the football. And he was darting it that day. And again, the thing that's impressive, and I said this about Drew Lock 2 years ago, he was so impressive throwing the football. You could see the arm strength, the talent that he had. He's throwing the football to guys he's never thrown the football to in his life. He's got receivers from Nicholls State, from Southeastern, from LSU, from Tulane, from Southern, a couple of professional players that are there that are working with him. It's not like he brought his receiving corps from LSU there to throw the football to, and he was on target throwing it. The big question mark for me, as never, Myles, we understood he was thin, okay? I didn't like the first number, when he got on the scale for a long time because it was 1. Today, you like that fact that first number is a 2. And you like even better the second number because, he looks to be in that, 213, 218 range, somewhere in that range as a quarterback. And so physically, he's been able to keep that weight on for a period of time. Now, when you're younger, sometimes that's difficult. When you get older, man, it's harder to get it off. I'm testimony to that. It's much harder to get it off than at that point in your life because you just burn it off so quickly. And sometimes it's genetics. Sometimes, you're basically someone that can burn it off much quicker. That's just part of your metabolism. But he's done everything right. And the fact that Peyton Manning would take time out of the Manning camp to spend time with Myles Brennan, to talk to him, to me was impressive. That, that Peyton was there to watch him and to talk to him afterwards. And I'd be interested to hear Myles' take on this, on kind of that meaning, because most people go there, they're in awe of the Mannings right off the bat. It's almost like you gotta, you can collect stuff from osmosis from them, but they're in awe because they saw Peyton growing up, they saw Eli growing up. They saw film on the dad,
Sure.
so Archie always says that, they didn't see me play, but, they heard about that I was a decent player at Ole Miss, and they called me Mr. Manning. He said, you're getting old when you start to hear that Mr. Manning part of it. But the fact that Peyton would spend that time with him afterwards meant something. And the fact that, if he didn't think he could play, he's not doing that. If he didn't think he was a big-time player, he's not spending time talking to him. And the importance of some of the things as you're a younger player in life, you maybe can improve on. Maybe it's the part of film work or the footwork or putting more emphasis on the game in certain areas. And listen, there's nobody better to talk to about it than Peyton. And the fact that he spent that time, Matt, to me told me that told me right off the bat. And we saw Joe throw the football at Manning. It was like, man, he's stronger arm than he was the year before throwing the ball. You could tell. The zip was coming off the football a little bit more than it was the year before when we had saw him that 1 year at LSU. So I was impressed with that Peyton would spend that time with him. Man, because I know he tries to. Eli always says he's like a CIA agent. He's trying to get information that eventually he's going to use against you. Okay? But Myles is a backup quarterback. Okay?
Yeah.
And he's not going to Tennessee. That's the other part. So I think Myles has done everything he could to prepare himself for this moment. The big question mark with Myles that Joe could do very well is in critical moments to make that decision like a jet fighter pilot and make the throw downfield, the correct one. That part we have not seen yet, but man, he's prepared himself for this moment. And I'm impressed with that. He's prepared himself the best he can for this moment. And man, look who he got to throw to. You got the best wide receiver in college football. Racing McMath, who I think is going to have a terrific season this year. Terrace Marshall, if he can stay healthy, is an outstanding receiver and a potential top 40 pick in the draft. And you got the stud at tight end in Eric Gilbert. I mean, you don't have to talk to too many coaches there, and they give you the lowdown on just how good Eric Gilbert is. There is going to be a difference in system, and that to me offensively is going to be the big thing to watch, because I always think that the good fit and the mesh between people when you're a coaching staff is important. And last year, to have that coordination between Slinger and Joe Brady, and give Steve a lot of credit that, for some guys, their ego would have said, man, what? This guy getting all the credit for this? What about me? What about me? Steve didn't, he was the even keel guy. He worked with Joe. It was a great combination. But also, too, he had DJ Mangus with him, that was a good friend of Brady, and he took him to Carolina with him.
Mm-hmm.
George Munoz, look what happened with him.
Yeah.
As a guy that took that, and now he's at Baylor. Now you got new people. How well is going to coordinate with Scott Lanahan, who's been a pro coach, a number of different places where he's been an offensive coordinator or a passing game coordinator. How it's going to work with Russ Callaway, impressive resume, with Carter Sheridan, who has coached receivers a lot with the Saints, went to Tulane with Curtis Johnson, went to the high school ranks. He was at St. Aug. And Tyler Tettleton, who was a GA at OU, at Oklahoma. Then he's coached with the Jets and the Browns. How all that meshes together, because I think that's important to have that setup of crew. And I got to give Ed a lot of credit. He did a great job of setting that up allowing Joe to bring in Mangus, who he had known very well, and giving Munoz now more autonomy to work with Joe Burrow. And the common denominator is Ensminger, still there. Still there. James Craig, I thought, did a fabulous job. I thought last year, and I don't want to take anything away from Joe, I think he did a terrific job in the passing game part of it. He put in concepts that I had saw. They ran a lot of the same stuff. They did it at a much faster pace into that particular deal. But now you've got new people. How it works, but Craig is still there, who I thought did a fabulous job last year. Again, you've got people that are still in the offensive concept, but now you got a lot of new pieces. How does that work with Myles? How does that work with Myles and the coaching staff? That's an unknown because we didn't get to see the spring. There was no spring. Two practices. That was it. But, man, you got some talent there and some young talent as coaches to really bring out the best in Myles. I don't want him to be – I would love him to be Joe Burrow, but that, come on, that's some big moccasins to fill. I just want him, Ed said it best, just to be the best Myles he can be. And he's got some traits that are different from Burrow. And so you're going to have to adjust a little bit. It doesn't mean the offense will look the same, but I think you'll have certain plays and certain concepts that are a little different because he's different than Joe Burrow. And when, Myles moves on, if it's TJ Finley, if it's Max Johnson, you're going to adjust to that. I think that's the part of the game that Ed has become much better at, bringing in people that to adjust to the talent. Not being so rigid in a system that I'm married to it and I'm not going to move off of that. I think that's been his biggest attribute at LSU is that his ability to adapt very quickly. He made a mistake early on.
Mm-hmm.
The mistake left, and then he moved on with it. And he's been able to do that. And that's a different Ed Orgeron than the guy that was at Ole Miss.
True.
That's a totally different guy, and he'd be the first one to admit it, that he was a hard-headed Cajun from the Bayou, and he wanted to coach every position. And, he's admitted, it wasn't my fault or somebody. No, it came down to you. You got to change. And he's changed throughout the years, and that's what helped win them the national championship last year.
LSU will be on the practice field tomorrow. One of the other things I wanted to talk about is something that Ed Orgeron mentioned earlier in this week. Notably, John Emery returning kicks, and some other personnel questions as well, like Apu Ika and Tyler Shelvin both being on the field at the same time. How might those work? Let's start with the defensive line, Mike, with Shelvin and Ika. What might we expect of those two guys?
I'm hearing something in the background, Matt.
Brain, you have anything that's potted up over there?
All right.
Is that better, Mike?
Yeah, much better.
Okay,
better.
Sorry about that. I was asking about Shelvin and Ika being on the field at the same time and how that might work, and really, Mike, just how those guys might transition from 3-4 to 4-3.
Listen, I'm not worried about Tyler's switching from 3-4 to 4-3. I mean, he'll be able to do that. My biggest concern is, and I've told you this before, sort of like me, it's that second number when you get on the scale. His first number is a 3. The scary one is the second number when he gets on that scale, because if he's in shape, which you're hearing in the tone of the coach, that he'd like to see him at a little lower weight.
Yep.
Because it just wears you down. When you're that big, if you're 360 pounds, come on, you're just going to wear down during a game. Man, he is a really talented guy. And what's so special about him is, for a big man, how quickly he can move. I can't say he's a great pass rusher, but he pushes the pocket, and a lot of times it's almost like he forklifts that center right back into the lap of the quarterback, which, man, a quarterback, that scares you the daylights out of you. But when that happens, one of them, I think, will be cocked. I grew up, I watched the Steelers. One of the things that made them special with that 4-3 alignment was they cocked Joe Green. sort of to the left or to the right of that center on that snap. Man, that guy is beating sweat from day one to have to deal with that. So one of the two is going to be sort of cocked toward the center so that he can kind of wipe him out and the other guy can get a free run up the field. But, man, those are two big guys that can penetrate and cause you some havoc. And I'm a firm believer in this. I wrote it 5 years ago. I'm a believer today that with less and less edge rushers that you can find, I don't care if you run in 3-4 or 4-3, you can't find them anymore. They're few and far between. That inside pressure is critical. So I think what they're trying to do here is devise a scheme where you can get those two big guys in there. You play a little power football with them. And you have the depth that you can sort of rotate those defensive tackles inside. But one of them, I would kind of think you're going to kind of cock him to the left or to the right of that center most of the time, right where that guy's snapping, and see how well he handles it and try to play a little power right up the middle to get pressure on the quarterback, which is, to me, the worst thing. I deal with enough of them on a day-to-day basis that they all agree on one thing. Middle pressure is the hardest to have to handle. It takes away your ability to step up in the pocket, make a throw, and you're on the move now. They got other fast guys on the edges that can catch you. When you got two big guys there, it causes you some problems, especially if you don't have a really good center, or maybe you're a little bit weak at the guard position where that guy can't handle that 350-pound man.
Yeah.
He's more used to handling the 300-pound guy. Now, all of a sudden, you got two big guys, and having to block that is difficult, very difficult. So they may not make the sack, but guess what? They create the play. They get you out of your comfort zone. They make you do something at quarterback you don't like to do. That's either throw it too fast or get them on the move.
Mike, one more thought here in this segment. We'll do listener questions to wrap. John Emery, I get asked about him more than probably anybody else because
me too.
Right. I mean, the recruiting profile was so high, but you and I talked about it all last year. Your eye, what you're seeing on the field, doesn't lie. But Ed's talking about letting John Emery return kicks. What role is there for John, maybe even early in the year?
Well, I would want him to return kicks too. I mean, he's fast. He's got as a running back, you got field vision. And so you're trying to make people miss. Last year, what you saw a lot, Clyde's hand up in the air.
Right.
Okay. So,
every time, man.
And that hand's way up in the air. Now, I'm interested to see how he battles it with Trey Palmer, because I think that's the competition there. Because, man, I want a guy to return kicks that's got field vision and then that is fast, that can scoot up the field and quickly. And Trey can do that. So I think that'll be some big competition for him there. But I think with John, and having watched him at Destrehan, he was a really good receiver coming out of the backfield. He could catch the football. One thing with Clyde, he was, I thought, their best blocker, pass protector at running back. Now, I've seen stuff where he's not that good of a pass protector. My thing is, have you watched LSU play? It's not like you're watching Furman or James Madison every once in a while. He's catching guys, as a blitz protector. But he was so skilled as a receiver coming out of the backfield, as a route runner, because he'd set you up a little bit and he beat one-on-one downfield. When you've got the field spread like what LSU did a year ago and like they'll do this year, you need that running back that can run that good route and get separation downfield. I think that's John Emery's role, and it'll be running back by committee early on. I think Chris has the distinct advantage, and I think Ed loves those power runners.
Mm-hmm.
I think he likes those guys, and I told him right off the bat who he reminded me of is Lindell White, as a guy who he had at USC, who he helped recruit from Colorado. That was a different type power back when he got him to USC. Him and Reggie together, when they got near the goal line, a lot of times they were giving the football to Lindell White because of his power skills. So I think that Emery has a role here, no question about it. I'm interested to watch on how the return game is different this year, because we saw what it was 95% of the time it was a fair catch.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear that this year. Just listen to how Ed's talking. He's talking about, well, we're looking at Trey Palmer. We're looking at John Trey Kirkland, John Emery. He spoke about him. Bang. That tells you that McMahon's going to do something a little bit different on the special teams part of the game. But I think where John can make a real quick impact is as a receiver coming out of the backfield. Because all I'm telling you is, one-on-one, and he gets a step on a dude, that guy ain't catching him. He ain't catching him. That's all I can tell you. Man, John's got an extra burst out in the open field that's unique for a big back. And he can get up there real fast. So I think that's part of it with Emery, that I think you'll see him a lot more used as a receiver coming out the backfield. And again, the big part of that is Myles has been known as a flamethrower. As a guy, man, that ball's coming out of there, and it's sort of the same speed on a 20-yard out as it is the little swing pass. How well he's developed that part of the game. Because I want to see that with Myles. Joe, had it. He did a lot of that even when he's played a little bit at Ohio State. When you saw him there, he was good throwing the football coming out of the backfield. When you watch Myles, a lot of times the fastball was always the pitch.
Right.
How well he's progressed in being more of a touch passer on the shorter routes.
Ask Mike, where do you see Clowney and Clay Matthews signing?
Clowney, I think he's going to Tennessee.
Okay.
Clay Matthews, I think, is a wait player. I think he will wait it out and see. He's looking for the right fit. He's a 3-4 edge rusher at this stage. So I think he's looking for a fit right there. But I just have a feeling Clowney will end up in Tennessee.
Just a feeling, huh? Just a hunch?
Just a tad.
Glenn Laurie on Twitter asks, Mike, what do you think of the cornerback at Landry Walker, Travis Walker?
I think, man, he's got some skills there, and he can flat out run. So, man, development of a corner today, I think, is so crucial because that is almost becoming like defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers aren't there. I think he's got a shot to be a really good player. Really good player.
Ask Mike, under a minute, will Antonio Brown sign with the team?
No.
Ask Mike, records for the NFC South.
I think the Saints are at 12-14.
I'll take it.
I think Tampa pushes the 10 mark.
Wow, 10-6?
10-6. I'll go with Atlanta as a 500 football team, and I think in year one for Matt Rule, he struggles. He's a 5 or 6 win team in Carolina.
He is Mike Detillier, and he is with us every Thursday for a full hour, an hour or two. Mike, you are the man. We appreciate you as always. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, brother.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.